I speak a lot about how all good literature kind of stems from the idea of tragedy, and you could kind of then juxtapose tragedy to misery. And I do think the two are very different because tragedy, I think, is like what we were talking on when we were talking on RCs with the great work that you do in that regard as well, of it being circular, a circular ruination. I think tragedy is circular, but it's circular in the manner of we look at it together as human beings with all of the art that we have and communion. We're still good at heart, perhaps could still be said. And it's so that we move forward. Even if it's a circular tragedy, we move forward. We move round and round those tracks together. But misery is so deeply inherent that I think that it cannot be booted once it really sinks its teeth in. It's like grief.
This is Story to Count with Jen Jumba. In conversations with writers, something magical happens, and as readers, we begin to see them as human beings and not just the name on the spine of a book. My hope is through these conversations, you learn about their craft and them as a person, and you'll become like me. Fiercely loyal, want to read their current book, entire backlist, any future book, or any book they blurb. And when you see their name, you'll want to support them, not only as incredible storytellers, but also the thoughtful individuals you have come to know. And I'm super excited because my guest today is Anthony Gedell. We are going to be talking about his debut novel. So first of all, congratulations on your first book. That's an incredible accomplishment. Anthony has a background. He's in New Jersey, and he's done publishing in Hobart, Poverty House, Variant, Revolution John, Punk Noir Magazine, and he's an editor at Tough Magazine. And you notice that a lot of those publications are poetry and crime. And I like to think of Anthony as kind of that intersection where crime intersects with poetry, because his debut novel, Love Lies in the Throes of Rhetoric, is simply gorgeous. It is an incredible story, but not only that, it's told in a beautiful way. So I'm so glad you're joining me this evening to talk about this debut novel. Let's imagine that we were at a cocktail party and I asked you about your debut novel. How would you introduce Love Lies in the Throes of Rhetoric?
Well, first of all, Jennifer, with your violin strings as vocal cords and the drumming of your human heart, I appreciate your words and having me. I celebrate only being across from you. That is a feat. That is an accomplishment to be here with you. So thank you. And thank you for everything that you do. We were talking before we got on here, librarian extraordinaire, beyond just what we're doing here. It's such a dutiful life of deeds and acts, and it's so rooted in grace. So thank you. I suppose I would pitch it in the manner of just sort of the way you did, a literary crime novel, and pitching it in the manner also that the crime novel in some regard is the new American novel, I think, because it's a way of cross-examining society and a time and a place and conducting a more metaphysical investigation into the crumbling struts of not only the world itself, but the human spirits of the characters within that novel. So I would just sort of pitch it as a night of disappointing tidings between a group of dispirited couples leads to a senseless undertaking that is made. And at the spotlight are Trask and Eudora, who are sort of too young to feel so old, sweethearts racing towards a red light. And in the backdrop of a failing society are all of these failing loves. And at the heart of it as well is the hunt for a killer on the loose. And on the track of these spiraling tracks comes a series of revelations where the mysteries are solved in the manner of a confession. So in this moment of madness and mania, here we are.
It is such a great book, such a great story. And yeah, it seems a little bit dark in terms of the society that they're living in, that these people feel that they have no choice in the things that they're doing and the journeys that they're on, and still trying to find a way to connect with one another. I'm thinking in particular about Eudora and Trask, this couple who want to be together and don't want to be together at the same time. I mean, you capture that duality of things. Can you talk a little bit more about them as a couple?
I'm glad you asked that, because doing these things, it's always when it comes to roost to those two that I think I'm most moved. Because, I mean, in the face of, I guess, misery, I suppose, I think we hope to not move or continue on in luxury, because I think then we become kind of deceitful in our acceptances of our traumas and burdens. But, those kind of loveless loves, that's at the heart of a noir novel. You can tap into that, but I think that there's something more between them. I think that there is a true love, and I think that the world gets in the way of that love. And I think she says to him, I don't know what's wrong with me. I try to love you how I love you. And they're just sort of punching bags for their fractured hearts. And a little bit of it is very much under the skin as well with those two. I would say maybe very much so. The 2 letters in there actually were written to me verbatim. And I just think it's observation and deduction as well. And some of it was cut. There was more on the relationships of today. And I guess they would have, they call that in our culture situationships. I think every story is a love story, and every love story is something of a ghost story. Trask and Eudora, there's a true love there. There's a real heartbeat. Eudora is so plagued, I think, by the great enemy of nihilism, and it really has sank its teeth in her. And they have these petty qualms between them, these battles, these linguistic battles where it's just who could just kind of spew the most pessimistic stuff at one another.
Right.
And he's usually holding up a shield for her because there's still that great care, there's that great love, but it's as though the world doesn't allow it to exist. And, there's all sorts of things going on with that relationship. And I don't want to get too far off on it being, the idea of how could you go on and find love when true love passes you by and it slips through your fingers, let's say, without getting kind of too corny there.
Right.
But it's also kind of like, the slow knife of grief is turning always. And I think grief is not something to be survived, it's something to be outlived. And this is not to go into too much detail about, obviously, the ending of that relationship, but the idea of that grief, that ancient grief being represented in that true love, which, I don't know, is rare maybe these days. Maybe if you talk about it, it seems a little bit cinematic, or just kind of has the effluvia of just something that is, just untetherable to something that we could connect to anymore as a society or a culture. But again, I do think at the end of the day, on your deathbed, I think we talked on this before we got on, you'll remember the magnitude of that love, I think. And it's something that I don't think would ever leave Trask or you. But there's something at the heart of their relationship that kind of lenses the whole book in many different nuanced and layered ways, where it's not just a telling of their own story, but rather also the society at large. I could go on and on about this, and I don't want to ramble too much, but there's a lot to be said about that relationship.
Yeah, I think looking at their relationship, they have this, it feels like as a reader, you're kind of observing them and kind of understanding what they're thinking. There is that profound love. However, I think it frightens or seems to frighten both of them. So I find themselves bickering over words, over who can be like out worse the other. And I think about Eudora because it comes up in the book that she's really battling mental health issues. So bringing these up, I think, is a good thing. I think it's something we should talk a little bit more often about, and stopping to understand those that we care about, how they're really doing, not just what they're posting on social media. But she talks about the severity of her impossible sadness. And then we see it kind of unfold with Trask, that her impossible sadness doesn't just impact her and her life, but it impacts him because he cares about her. And I think about us in life, that when somebody we care about is suffering or going through a tough time, it impacts us because we want to make it better for them. So I also see that coming up, that theme between the two of them in this book.
You couldn't be more right. And she's his Achilles heel. And what do I mean by that? I think she is his Achilles heel in so many ways, because again, with writing, it's not really happening these days too much, but you're trying to, again, not force feed the reader with everything. And there should be something of an abstract painting where the words convey something more to the reader than what they say. And that's where I'm getting at. Just so much could be unpacked on just those two characters alone. But
right.
Sheep is Achilles heel because there's this also tethering thread of Trask trying to be a soldier becoming a shepherd in a way. and he's running towards Grace, and he's trying to find the light, but he wanted them to do it together. And she has all of these cynical, pessimistic outlooks where it wouldn't even dawn on her that a relationship is meant to be worked at. And she's so burdened by maybe living of the flesh and not of the spirit. And, boredom ceases every purple heart, and we're always searching for fulfillment. And this is not to, I have a lot of sympathy and empathy for and love for Eudora myself. Again, it's under the skin, but I've had readers again come to me and say, they don't like Eudora, but it's always the ones who say that she broke their hearts that really speak to me. And I'm trying to stay focused on your question, because he really does care about her greatly, and she does him as well, even more probably. But something just, again, gets in the way there. And I think, again, why do I say she's his Achilles heel? Because he's a very intense, cerebral, intuitive, laconic man who's also a deep feeling man and a very physical man, which is really just, again, he's not just a warrior. He's not just a poet. He's a warrior poet in many regards, but he's also too self-aware. He's not above anybody, but maybe he's certainly off to the side. And he's been dealt some bad cards, but whenever he's trying to make those gains towards that light, just seeing her in makes him want to murder the universe. And it's the one thing that sends him right back down the tunnel of that very same nihilism. And his self-sabotage is glorious. And he's a maverick at just sort of just destructing the self and then finding even deeper rock bottoms beneath those hells and just keeping on with the digging. And I just think that kind of trickery at the very heart of its experience and its world is a society that's, I guess, based on symbols, which makes that love kind of symbolic for a lot of things.
Right.
So in its essence, it's an artificial society, but it's a real love. And in that love are those very real, high intense human emotions and interactions. At the end of the day, they could have probably found peace. They could have found a mode of being that wasn't in the manner of the expression of a volcanic eruption. That was just, again, where are these words or emotions even coming from? But it's just, again, their worldview and their experience really doubles down on that nihilism when you got to kind of build your own church and that whole thing of, heaven being a home with the one you love and the doves come home. It doesn't need to be sufficient, but it needs to be enough. And I think he was trying to push her towards having that mindset of it is enough. It is something to be worked at. But, she feels like that, nobody loves her. She has nothing to look forward to.
Yeah.
And, that there is that element of mental illness, but she is so strong with her conviction that it's almost the form of a knowing with her.
Right.
Where it's not some other, deity plaguing that knowing, but that would also then be, I think, some form of a desperate way of convincing the self, which is never really good for anybody. Yeah, I mean, I digress. I'm rambling a lot, but that's where the book really comes alive for me, is through those two, because I think also, I'm trying not to, I say spoiler, but I choose my language. Sorry.
We don't want to spoil.
Right. No. And, there could be, you could lose hope in the thing and you could kind of anchor your young heart. There could be that one loss. I think that, again, is just that slow turning knife of grief that places you now in the woods of Dunsinane on fire, let's say, to make a Macbeth reference. And that's now where you dwell, with your servant called Satan to come and just kind of feast you upon your own miseries because you have lost hope in love. It sounds corny or cheap using that word, but that's what it is. And, Eudora also is fundamentally a representation of the snare character, which is so prominent in American literature. I always fall back on that line in Ecclesiastes where it says something along the lines of the man who fears God will be free of the snare and the one who doesn't will be enveloped in her chains. And so there is that toxicity a little bit where, she does try to rattle his cage and she does try to disrespect him and belittle him. But I think along the way, as you see that unfold and he tries to be there for her and he's not perfect at all either. I think that was, again, just kind of a mechanism from her of pushing him away and also just a sign of, or maybe a plea of desperation in the manner of convincing herself. But yeah, she's the one with that conviction, I think. It's never any malice with her. I think she's really got poetry to her. She's poetry in motion. And because she represents that other kind of type of character that is the pessimistic monologues. She's the vessel for that. But with her, there's still just something of the drumming of the human spirit. And she has such a way of looking at life that makes her too, again, almost intuitive for her own good. And it makes her seem cerebral and, or better yet, cynical where she isn't. I think both of them are sort of like that. And so they're really all that they got, both of them. And, you let that slip through your fingers again. I think that we lose sight on what it really means to be alone. And I think that's in our society now. I think there's so many of us, we're so far apart, that whole kind of loneliness epidemic thing in our culture.
Right.
And, yeah. So, I mean, I'm going on a lot, so I'm going to digress. I'm very sorry, but I could talk about those two a lot.
No, they're incredible characters, and you kind of set up the situation, in the society in which they're living, where we've lost our jobs, our money, our home. Maybe we've just done up and lost our damn minds. And I see such similarities in Trask and Eudora, but both of them present outwardly different. Whereas Eudora is very cynical out loud. And then Trask is trying to find that lightness and that hope, right? Where he talks about you need to find a pocket of happiness in every day, tells her she's not trying. And at the same time, you have that juxtaposed with the fact that he's a PI and trying to solve a crime. So, I mean, I don't imagine PIs who are trying to solve a grisly murder as people that would be happy.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then that also kind of, I guess, the idea of like, what is the writer but a detective as well. So where I'm getting at is there's always that dichotomy and maybe, again, just symmetry in the idea of the detective who can't even solve the problems within their own home. And, you have this dying love on the canvas of this dying world, which is furthered by the canvas of this investigation into a murderer with a great moral message that they are trying to portray in the work that they do. But inside of everything that you just said also, I just think, these high or low society people who feel heartbroken over money or emotional transactions, maybe we were satisfied for decades, with novelties, but if we as novelists also kind of bear witness to this kind of ancient grief again, and wrote about our worlds and produced, I guess, something in the means of a kind of useless art, it would be without the drumming of the heartbeat of those characters that really stand up on the page. And I think that is the human experience of those two characters, which makes the plot itself moot. That's just something to drive the novel forward. But where it comes alive is that relationship of Trask and Eudora. And they also have these deeply internalized, I think, cynical feelings as well, because she is very vocal with it. And I don't know, when she's vocal with it, who she's even talking to, because I think at times in those relationships, they just become audience and we're on a stage to just kind of vent the litany of grievances and contradictions and injuries that we are. And as we said before we got on, you need somebody to hear it. And that pendulum that swings, that ebbs and flows between just being the instrument of our liberation, I think, to those feelings, there's the ones, again, who just, there's no swinging back. It's not so much a pendulum, but it's a swinging axe over them. And it's just slowly descending upon their heads. And I don't know, you have to kind of really watch someone go through that pain and see the look in their eyes as they are spewing that pessimism. And I think then you will find some form of loneliness that is unreachable, because I think just they're so gone into that misery, and I speak a lot about how all good literature kind of stems from the idea of tragedy, and you could kind of then juxtapose tragedy to misery. And I do think the two are very different, because tragedy, I think, is like what we were talking on when we were talking on RCs with the great work that you do in that regard as well, of it being circular, a circular ruination. I think tragedy is circular, but it's circular in the manner of we look at it together as human beings with all of the art that we have and communion. We're still good at heart, perhaps could still be said. And it's so that we move forward, even if it's a circular tragedy. We move forward, we move round and round those tracks together. But misery is so deeply inherent that I think that it cannot be booted once it really sinks its teeth in. It's like grief. So I think that's kind of where Eudora resides. It's a different cul-de-sac of pain. And again, Trask can't bear to see it, and he can't bear to see even others disregard it, who should be there for her, which now again is the dissection of the American family and
Right.
that nihilism and that loss of hope. I guess I sort of grew up around people that you didn't really know, if it was, and I'm not foul talking anyone, and I'm
Right.
not making any claim. This is just, America. Here we are. You got to bear witness as a writer. It's observation and deduction. But sometimes so that you can't tell when families are together if it's a funeral or a holiday, Christmas, and that's what is, I think, really at the heart of Eudora is that we're talking all this about her, but there's that want for just really simply, we kept using this word good in the name of the good or the bad. Like, let's not get too kind of brainy here. I think she just really wanted everything to be good and filled with love and her family
She
to
did not
be
have a
happy.
good, childhood.
Right, and show that happiness and that excitement. So that desire is there, and that's, I think, again, your intentions and your thoughts are as just as much actions as what your hands put down and what your feet put forth, I think, in a way.
Yeah. This book, I know I talked to you a little bit earlier, is not a big book, but it is a book that it took me a while to read only because every phrase, every sentence is so thoughtful, so intentional, so beautifully written that there's a visceral response to it. It evokes an emotion, which is what good art should do. Reading this, just how you were able to capture everything. I can't wait for others to read this. Going back to something you said a little bit earlier, you talked about love and ghosts. And I'm thinking about that. And I'm thinking about not like Casper the Friendly Ghost, and certainly not like some horror film, but it's a sense of grief that will kind of haunt us. That loss of connection that Eudora didn't have with her parents growing up, or that Trask is desperate to connect with her in a meaningful way, and for her to be able to see herself the way he sees her. I think there's a lot of, whether it's imposter syndrome where we just don't think we're deserving of love. You bring up a lot of good points in this book and themes in terms of like the stories we tell ourselves, in terms of, are we more than the bad things that have happened to us? And how do we know which experience is going to imprint on us and that we carry with us? And what is something, going back to your circular, what is something that we can kind of still be in a circular and then kind of move forward with it so that that circle gets bigger and wider diametrically from that very hurt.
I think, and that's wonderful too, because you never want art to be so much of a monologue, and just really even just about the craft of it. I remember scrapping everything, and the writing of it was a really intense process that I always, people would never really believe me, but I knew, though, I wanted it to be short and something in the realm of spare, because I'm like, well, who reads these days and who cares now? And the great American novel is perhaps the great American short novel, but I still wanted to find, and this is something that came alive in the process of finding a way of making it have that momentum and be spare and short, but then inject the effluvia of language and poetry, because you need to have, again, a deep characterization and good prose. And we spoke before we got on again about the idea of, what separates art and craft, and that's emotional resonance. So you need that to happen as well. High intense human emotions and interactions, character entangled in circumstance, and revelations of language and self under pressure, a timely and important infused with tragedy, heartbreak, and love. That all needs to happen, but you need good prose, and you need to have something in the manner of metaphor and anecdote, obviously symbolism happening in such a unique way that's never been done before, and an artistry in the words that's so nuanced and layered that it needs more dissection to get down to what exactly is happening. So that just came alive in the process, where I still found a way to kind of breathe in the poetry in those lines, and the language that I find to be striking, and what I find also to be good literature. And from the moment that I found that, I think I rejected the idea that artists have the right to stand alone, I think. And it kind of offered me as a subject that this is not just a personal dream of mine anymore. And I mean dream like conjuring up the story, but rather a reality that needs to be lived and suffered by and for everyone, perhaps. So the language, again, I could go into that. It just came about in the process and the sparse way that the story unfolds. And the second part of that question was in regards to just, I guess, the idea of, I do think that still, I think fiction, I think traces, and I speak on this often, I think it just traces the consequences of mankind's ambition. And I think it captures the psychology of nihilism again and ideological extremism, let's call it. But it's them, something in the realms of a fearful combination that forces us to be complacent in a narcissistic society. But, great fiction is a better predictor of human history than economics. And human history, I mean, again, human love, human tenderness. And I just kind of landed on this recently, and that's because it's up to the writer to be intensely observant and introspective and just sort of reflect back the idea, out of the confusion of life. It's about the bliss and bale of the things that hurt and the things that help that you're trying to capture. And what is that but the totality of a relationship?
You talk about it being sparse and yeah, maybe in terms of if we're going to look at word count. But there is such a profound feeling when these words are read. I mean, even in the very beginning, you don't say heart, right? You describe it as that rubied jewel hanging in our chests. It's so beautifully said, or the graveyard of our past selves that we leave behind. Just such thoughtfulness and intentionality with word choice. My background is I used to write radio commercials.
Oh,
So
wow.
a 60-second spot is roughly 120 words. And we used to always tell clients, if I had more time, it would have been shorter. So the ability for you to, as you say, write sparse is hard. It's incredibly difficult because you are so thoughtful and deliberate with what word goes where and in what order so that it conveys the weight of what these characters in the story are feeling that resonates with us because we've all experienced that same love, that same hurt, that same ghost of something that continues to stay with us that we thought we were over or had gotten past. So it's
And you,
just so well done.
well,
I
thank
still
you.
marvel.
Thank you. And I really do appreciate it. I just, again, what you do, I can't thank you enough. And you mentioned that idea of just, the idea of, every love story is a ghost story. And the word choice that, that's at the author's dispense. We're all reaching into the same toolbox, but you have to have the language stand up, and that is being real choice with your words. But what is more real in our universe than a person's life? And I think we have language to capture that. So for example, how could we hope to be better rendering a life? It starts in the lines, I think, in our word choice. I just feel maybe in a way, because there's this gritty realism to it. I always wanted there to be. I didn't want it to have any kind of, I just wanted to hold the camera up, let's say. But I think in that way, realism would be to art. I think kind of what photography is to painting. I don't know if that makes sense,
Yeah, it does.
which makes kind of like a reportage of naturalism, and it reproduces itself, even if you don't choose the right words. If you know that you're trying to capture something, and not reproduce something, you're kind of now garnering a reality in the essence of just something that is deeply felt by every human being. And it also should be very much under your skin, which is observation and deduction. And so that language, while you could really kind of go to some other place when you write, you tap into some other place, especially if you do it in the manner of, something like a physical bout. There needs to be something of a physicality to it. I think, again, it's just, you could only really anticipate the future by understanding the souls of men and women. And you do that by understanding also the painful experiences you've been through and perhaps bearing witness to the painful experiences others have been through. And so we're trying to move those patterns back to people, because fiction, I think, kind of moves from the individual out. but we're trying to bring that back. And I think what we do is we try to find those words, because language obviously is very internal. And if you
Right.
find those words, I think you lasso someone back to the real kind of themes of the work that you're trying to put forth. And it starts with those words, the right words.
Yeah. So you mentioned, being observational, right? What is it like to go out and grab lunch with you? I mean, are you always observing, you know,
Yes.
always? Is it distracting, or is it helpful, or, can you ever kind of turn that part of your brain off?
So I've been told that I should be slapped a few times and that I could be a little intense. Um, it's similar to that line in the book where I could be too intuitive for my own good,
Hmm.
maybe too cerebral, and it makes me seem cynical where I'm not. But, and it gets me in trouble. Maybe this is really something stupid to say, but I just kind of stumbled into teaching, and I never really went to school much myself. Whenever they say, I'm observing you, I'm like, because you get observed your classes, I'll point blank be like, no, I'm observing you, because
I'm
I'm just like,
observing you observing me.
I'm observing you. Yeah. Like, because, I'm sort of now thinking, did you watch that show, The Bear?
Yes.
I'm like, why did no one ever write? And I'm not even talking about the stoners of the world, the book Stoner by John Williams, the academia novel. But I'm like, why hasn't there been the Bear, but in academia, where somebody just loses their mind from the profound ignorance that borders something the form of a miracle, or perhaps a malevolence that's so reprehensible that it's unspeakable, that administrators put forth every day, administration. And this is just a long-winded answer of, I am always watching and I'm bearing witness. And I don't really think much people are. They're just sort of on autopilot because they're wind up dolls by the media that they're plugged into, and their own kind of malice and bitterness and resentment. And I'm not trying to make a claim here, judgmental
Oh,
claim, but
no.
that's I guess, I don't know why I went down that track of saying, like, I'm way too observant.
And very
Even as a
introspective.
kid,
Yeah.
yeah, even as a kid, I was too aware of a lot of adult hypocrisies. And, that's why, again, I always say not above anyone, but certainly off to the side. Just, again, bearing witness, but in the manner of not, I'm better than anyone. I don't know. That would be a ridiculous claim. But just, again, as you said, introspective, probably too much for my own good.
I think it's hard for most people to sit with themselves in stillness and in quiet.
I think so. Absolutely.
I mean, people can't even stand and wait in line for a coffee without scrolling through their phone. Now, if it was a
Yeah,
book, I would be okay. Like, okay, you can be distracted if you're listening to an audiobook or you're reading a book, but no, I'm kidding. But I find people have a very hard time. I'm just going to sit and I'm going to be quiet, because when you sit and are quiet, that's when thoughts come, right? And
I think
we're
so.
not real
Yeah, it
comfortable
makes you something
sometimes
like,
with ourselves and what we're thinking. And then that means, well, if I think this, then maybe I should do this or that. But I think, going back to your point of your book, I think this book will tether people to be able to sit with the things that are inside themselves as they're experiencing it, not just through Eudora and Trask, but even Daniela and John, who were terrific characters as well. I
thank
think
you.
sometimes it's a thing that we need to read to ground us, to remind us that we're human beings. We're not, technically, we're cyborgs if we're always walking around with the smartphone and doing our thing, but we need to kind of ground ourselves, go back to basics, human kindness, human civility, engagement. So
I think that's beautifully said. And I mean, you were incredibly generous even when we got on the book and the impact it had on you. And I just, even now continuing it, it's not just to pat myself on the back or just anything beyond just the deed of what you do for us. Thank you.
oh,
And
quite
I
welcome.
so agree with that. I mean, what is the 21st century slave bracelet but the phone? And I always say idly scrolling the phone is the equivalence of taking a nap without the benefits of rest. And I do that.
Well
It,
said. I think I'm
yeah.
going to
And it
use that
really
from now
does.
on.
It almost narcoticizes you in a way. It anesthetizes you. You might as well just go bang your head against the rock. And that's what causes people, I think, to be so disjointed from reality and also so disjointed from themselves. And that causes now you to be something in the manner of a penned cow And that nervousness, again, that anxiousness, it makes you essentially just, again, that wind up doll to those plaguing anxieties that aren't even your own anymore. And you have not lost your mind, but surrendered it willingly. And when your mind goes, your heart follows suit, and your compassion and your understanding and your empathy and your grace. But not being able to sit alone in quiet. Now it's like you better gully up, because we are so disjointed and fractured as a society. It's, you better make peace with the self, or there's going to be not consequences but vibrations that will slowly turn to earthquakes, I think, in your very own life, that have cracked the foundation of that life, and you have nothing to stand on, I think.
I think it's really easy to be distracted these days.
Yeah,
Right,
what's that whole thing?
because we're uncomfortable with the quiet and the stillness and that who am I, that sense of self. Well, we'll just my sense of self is however I've curated myself on social media versus how many people are in my close group, the people that who genuinely care about. Obviously family, because I didn't have Eudora's upbringing. I had a great upbringing.
That's it.
But, you just thinking about that, and I think we need to not be so distracted and fractured. I think that's what compounds the loneliness that the Surgeon General now considers to be an epidemic. And so I want everybody to read Love Lies in the Throes of Rhetoric, and read it slowly and deliberately and carefully, and let it just sit. Well, I'm on a podcast, so you can't see, but like sit right here in your chest and your heart. And I was thinking about, you said when your heart goes, then, your mind goes, or your mind is connected to your heart, body, soul. I had somebody, like we all go through stress with work or some other situation. And I, have a great physician who's a DO, so comes at things holistically, and said, go the opposite way. Do something art related, do something creative,
Mm.
and go heart to head instead. And I just thought, wow, that's really great. So I'm hoping with this book that people will be able to do that and slow down and find the things in themselves that ground them, and remember that we're all part of this incredible human race.
It's so beautiful, and I'm so receptive of your words. And like I always say, I'm listening in order to understand and not respond. So anything that I say is conjured up by you. It's, again, you got violin string vocal cords, and you're playing my own with your compassion and just existence, ethereal existence. And reality is the source of art's emotion, I think. And I think, again, that battle is won. That battle is not won without language. And going back to the sensibility of, I always found life, you're trying to just kind of you're trying to find a little hole in the universe, and build your home there, kind of. But those sensibilities of, the real world, if we want to call it that, which gives life, to bodies and statues through its splendor, or whatever you want to kind of go down the list of, just sort of, the sources of light. I think great style in work kind of lies midway between the artists and those emotions again. And the idea of finding the very few principles within those works to propose meaning to folks where that meaning might have been lost, and turn melancholy to something like rebellion, that's the hope. That's the hope. And just, you get asked all sorts of questions if you go to readings. And I'm very big on what you said in the regard of just these human moments, that those are forms of publication, and that's all that matters. When I have a thing where I go to a reading, I don't really like to market it too much, because I'm just sort of like, I don't even want to put it out there, because what matters most is the people in this room. And let's have it so that it's only the people in this room that remember this, because here we are and we bear witness to one another.
And
And I
you'll
think that's
never
just,
have that same thing repeat in life. You'll never
yeah,
have
you
that
could,
same
yeah.
group of people experiencing that very same thing at that moment together ever again.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
this podcast could not be published, and it's worth $1 million to me just being here with you, just this
Likewise.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, this could have been just a phone call, and it's the same thing. It's the same merit to me. And that's just, again, the singular entity that is you. But you get asked all sorts of things, and somebody asked me, what do you want people to take away from your book? And I was like, I don't. It's not for me to answer. I want you to take away whatever it is that you take away. I sure have my answer to that, but. And the person responded, call your people. was her response, is kind of what she took away from it, and just appreciate life more and the people around you. And so I don't know, I was really moved by that, and I just thought of that. But I just do think that, sometimes even the greater the, you know, artists, I guess, revolt against reality. And revolt sounds heavy, and so does reality. But that revolt, the greater the revolt against the world, I think there's something of a counterbalance that could happen, if that makes sense.
Makes
And that
perfect sense.
weight, yeah, that weight can never overpower the unique requirements of the artist, I think, if it's in the line with that self relation. And now the stakes are higher because there needs to be, obviously, as we said, beautiful writing, nature, human tenderness, the imparting of
Mhm.
wisdom amplified by extreme circumstance in high stakes where lessons could be learned, and a transformation had for characters and readers and the writer themselves, all of it under pressure. That's the aim. That's the hope. And I just don't think that could be happening from even so a place of comfortability. It's got to come from that trauma, that pain. But it's again that idea of tragedy and misery. It's so that we could face them and move forward, and especially for the artists themselves. Because if there's that revolt, you're not trying to paint a still life. That battle has to be won again, and that purpose is as much chosen in a certain way because art is a revolt against the world, but it encompasses, I think, what is fleeting or perhaps unfinished. And I'm rambling a lot, but
Mm-mm.
art does not, I think, take anything more than the purpose of, I don't know, giving another shape to reality, which nevertheless then again proposes some kind of healing, I guess.
But so well said. I would argue that they're similar to you mentioning a still life painting is relatively passive. People will
Mm,
stand and look at it. Whereas I feel like your book, Love Lies in the Throes of Rhetoric, is something that reaches up and tethers us for a more participatory experience reading this.
mm.
Being grounded by those lessons, whatever it is we take away, because we all read the same book, but with different life experiences coming to this book. So we're all going to take a little something different away. But this is something that I want people to invest their time in and engage with, because your world will be seen completely different after reading this.
Well, thank you. And
Yeah.
again, these are coming from you because you're making me think, and I just love what you said there. And this is why, again, I knew this about you from the work you produced, and again, that's why, again, you were on that list, like I mentioned, because how you engage with literature. But a healthy self, I think, again, to use your word, is one that is grounded in the power that created it. And the creation could be the creation itself, a book, or just the created self, the human being.
Mhm.
And I think that task requires a constant renewed faith. And I think that's what a good work can do. It could renew faith. So that self is a relationship that is constantly reflecting onto itself in the work. And that self is not merely, I think, it's not merely the relation, but the relation's own act of relating to itself and to others, and then also the creator. Now you're acknowledging some form of higher power. And I think that is established without any acknowledgement whatsoever. And if it's not, I think the self falls into despair. And that's another heavy word, I think.
Mhm.
And so that God, lowercase g, can be anything. And you're trying to find that in the work. And that could be the suffering that we all face because you're trying to instill that faith again. And I could be going on here and not making
No,
any
they
sense,
they
but
coexist. I mean, that's the
they
thing.
really do. They really do. And you ask yourself, what is the difference of believing in good and believing in God? I think there's a question that is always important to me. And I'm not making a zealous claim again. It's more about the good. So I think maintaining a healthy self requires that constant renewed faith in the power, I think, that's constituted again, almost in the form of a synthesis of opposing forces that's so finite and infinite and temporal and eternal to the self's existence that it depends on maintaining a balance between these poles that's in the self and the work, and then also to others. So now it's a quest for the grail in a way. And it's always now a meaning of self-actualization. And I think many great books take that structure. And this is what we need to encapsulate as writers. It's not politics. It's not oppression or privilege or identity. I think it's all that is in our heart, minds, and spirits. We all have the very same, um, I think, candles within those churches, and we're in those pews together. And I guess this was a long way of just saying, because I think what you mentioned there was the idea of just communion
Hmm.
in a book. And I couldn't agree more with that. I mean, I just kind of rambling on again. I
No,
apologize, but
I trust me. Those of you who are listening to Anthony talk, he talks beautifully. He writes beautifully. I mean, even if you get an email, like I've been lucky enough, the emails are constructed just like this, so beautifully phrased that I just want to like print them out and put them all over. So I would talk to you the rest of the evening, but we're approaching the end.
yes, man.
This is storied end. The final 5 questions. What game show do you think you could win?
Oh man, wow. Shoot, what game show do I think I could win? What's the one that you need to be the least intelligent for?
Jeopardy. Just kidding.
Yeah, right. Deal or no deal. You just got to pick a number. There you go.
There you go.
I could do it. Yeah.
Yeah. What was your favorite book as a child?
Ooh, as a child,
Hmm.
what, and I know that's what age group are we saying?
Whatever, whichever one that you remember reading and were completely captivated by.
Okay. And then, you know what? In my formative years, the one book that had an impact on me. So many different questions. There's so many different answers to that,
Yeah.
because now
There's
that
no
in
wrong.
terms
Yeah,
of,
there's no wrong.
yeah, this is a maybe kind of bizarre question answer, but because there's so many different answers I could give, and then it would have to kind of chronicle
Right.
when that book established itself. And I say established, but the goal of art, on the contrary, is not to establish rules or to reign any
Mm-mm.
kind of regard. First and foremost, it's to understand, and art sometimes, then will kind of have some reign over you. I digress. You're like, man, 5 answers here.
No, no,
Relax.
no, no. It's fine.
You
This is
know,
going to be a good one.
yeah, it's because I'm like, do I go like super young or like whatever? But I don't know. There was something about the Crucible, and it wasn't a book; it was a play
Yeah, Arthur Miller.
that was so striking to the principles even as a young person that I had. But then just the drama of it, obviously the ending we all know. And Daniel Day-Lewis, I think, heightened that with his performance in the play. And I never really went to school. I never really went. So this wasn't even read in school. And I remember actually, I would never go. And, I was in school one time. I think I got arrested for truancy and I had to go. And I was just, but I wasn't, I was just trying, I was working, I had to make my way on my own, and there's a whole story there. But I was in
I can't
school,
wait.
and I always had a book on me, and I'll never forget. I'm actually looking at the book over there. This teacher comes out and she's crying, and she handed me a copy. And I'm not making a claim on Stephen King. I'm not necessarily a fan or not a fan, but she handed me a copy of The Stand, and it was her late husband's copy. He had died, and she was crying, and she just said, "If you're not a writer, we failed as an institute," she said. And I'll never forget that because I always had a book on me. But that's, I guess, a way of just sharing something that is heartfelt, but also just, the Crucible. I didn't pass it in school. I passed it just, I was always just, I don't know what, it's snake bitten. I mean, it's a God given gift. And I don't think you choose your obsessions, they choose you. So, the writing and the reading thing just kind of is a way of just exercising a deed, because words are deeds. I think they prepare the soul, and move things towards tenderness and grace, that whole thing. But I digress. My goodness, I'm going 20 minutes on your last 5 questions
No,
here.
it's all good. It's a really interesting thing. I'll tell you my story about The Stand another day.
I'm excited.
Yeah, if you could
I'm
only eat,
driving to Ohio. I'm coming. We're having
yeah,
that. Yes.
yeah, there you go. If you could only eat one thing for breakfast for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Hard boiled eggs and sardines, all a grown boy needs. I'm broken on the go. All right. I'm trying my best.
There you go.
Sometimes I just stay fasted for long stints. So,
Yeah.
I think Oscar Wilde said there is not a single man among these unfortunate people locked up with me in this miserable place who does not have a symbolic relationship with the secret of life, I think he said. And I think that is something in the realms of in which I dwell. But I will tell you, the secret is hard boiled eggs and sardines.
I'm with you on the hard-boiled eggs, sardines, not so sure.
Come on, man. It's cheap. I could feed them to my dog. Where else could you get 22 grams of protein in a can? I mean, you're on the go. You're on the go.
Yeah.
You could steal them if you need to. Like, I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
I'm condemning myself on the air. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. I got the freedom of humankind still within me, okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Words are really important to you. What's your least favorite word?
My least favorite word.
Very introspective.
Right. My least favorite word.
If it helps, I'll tell you mine is slacks. Like women, are
Slacks.
you going to wear a pair of pants? I'm going to wear a pair of slacks. No, you're going to wear a pair of pants. Does
That
that
is
help?
so funny. I love that. That is great. And you know what? The only committed artists are those who, without refusing to take up arms, are those who, refuse to join the regular army. So you are not in the slacks army. I
I
get
am
it.
not in the
I get
slacks
it.
army.
Uh,
Team pants.
yeah. Wow. So that's a good answer.
It's okay. We can skip if you want.
I don't like the word narcissist because I find that as a country, it's a huge problem and it's also a hugely misunderstood and undefined word or improperly defined word.
Fair. And then the last question. What song is always on your road trip playlist?
Oh, wow. So I have a lot. I have a very eclectic playlist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only gonna say no. This is not gonna really reach anyone, but there's this punk rock band I really love, Every Time I Die, and their last two albums are more accessible. I think what is it, Low Teens, and I forget their last album, the name of it. But I'm only bringing this up because he could be said to be my favorite poet, Keith Buckley, who's also a novelist. He has two incredible books called Scale and Watch, incredible, but his lyrics are extremely provocative and very profound. So I'm all over the place. My playlist all over the place. I mean, I won't even list there's a song by Keith Buckley called Pedal, and the lyrics are the most provocative, or it is the most provocative poem, let's call it, I think,
Right. Set to music.
that I've ever read. But I'm all over the place. I'm loving this new band, but it's like kind of heavy rock again. But again, I'm country and soul, whatever it is, jazz. I digress on that. I'll leave it at one. But I'm all over the place. But the lyrics on that song
So
is
do you
just
think you'll write a song because you're so poetic and your language is so, as you said, emotionally resonant?
only if you sing it, Jennifer.
It's not going anywhere then.
No, all right. What is that? Death on Arrival.
Yeah, it's
Our
exactly
records
right.
go
Yeah,
on.
I do not have a voice for singing.
No, well, you got a voice for this, and we're lucky. We're lucky.
I'm lucky to all of you.
No, I think art today depends on our courage and our desire to see clearly. And boy, do you help us see clearly, Jennifer.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you to all of you who were listening. A huge thank you again to Anthony for such a great conversation about Love Lies in the Throes of Rhetoric, which is available now. If you want to read a story that is written with such beautiful and powerful language that it is impossible to just fly through the story, this is for you. Anthony has such a way with words and language that seem to crawl up into your head, heart, and soul as you journey with these characters. To find out who else is visiting, go to storytocount.com. This is Story to Count with Jen Jumba.